I'm telling you, she's a bully. This isn't funny. She needs to understand that just because she's a mother and got children doesn't mean that she can come in this store, disrespecting people, talking to them like everybody's beneath her. Somebody will have to do something about that. She could keep being a bully if she wants to, but that is going to catch up to her.
A McDonald's worker apparently goes on an angry Instagram rant, calling her manager a bully, and just 2 days later, that manager is dead, stabbed nearly 15 times in what prosecutors are calling a premeditated attack. Now, the woman behind that viral video, Afeni Muhammad, she's back in court as disturbing social media posts come to light and serious questions are raised about her mental state. We're going to break it all down right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
I got sent home early yesterday. I got sent home early today by the same person. I'm telling you, she's a bully. This isn't funny. She needs to understand that just because she's a mother and got children doesn't mean that she can come in this store, disrespecting people, talking to them like everybody's beneath her. She has no respect. And it isn't funny at all. She's a bully. I'm telling you. She's a bully. But to get sent home 2 days in a row, man, and I came in on my off day to make up my time, and she still sends me home early, it's not funny. Somebody will have to do something about that. It's not funny. It's not fair. It isn't funny at all. So, she could keep being a bully if she wants to, but that is going to catch up to her.
That woman, Afeni Muhammad, was back in court on July 23rd for what was supposed to be a probable cause conference. And when asked to state her name for the record, she apparently introduced herself with a different declaration.
Your Honor, Josh Jones appearing on behalf of Ms. McDonald, you standing to my left at the jury box. Please state your name for the record.
Afeni Muhammad. But I also go by Risen Phoenix.
Now, the 26-year-old appeared before a judge in Michigan's Macomb County for a probable cause hearing in connection with the fatal stabbing of her manager, 39-year-old Jennifer Harris, and this was at the McDonald's on 9 Mile Road in East Point. And as police confirmed, Risen Phoenix is Muhammad's Instagram handle, the same account where she posted 2 videos days before the killing, venting about Harris sending her home early. And we're going to play more of that in a minute, but first, here's what we learned from the court. So probable cause hearings in Michigan is usually where bail, a plea negotiation, stipulations, other procedural aspects, those are all discussed. It's not exactly what happened here. The hearing ultimately ended up being adjourned after Muhammad's defense attorney requested a competency evaluation, citing concerns about her mental state. And this was based both on police reports and his own interactions with her.
You're asking that this matter be adjourned for discovery, number 1, and number 2, you want it referred to the Forensic Center for Competency and Culpability, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Counsel does request at this time that Ms. Muhammad be referred to the Forensic Center for those matters. It's my understanding that Ms. Muhammad herself personally objects to the referral at this time.
What is the factual basis that you rely on for the referral?
Your Honor, based upon my observations of the case and reviewing the case, specifically the police reports, and then again my observations and interacting with Ms. Muhammad, I need to check those 2 boxes. Meaning, I need to make sure that 1, she is competent to stand trial, and then 2, that there's not an issue in regards to criminal responsibility or culpability.
Now, here's something interesting. Muhammad, the defendant, reportedly objected to this referral, but the judge approved it nonetheless. So now she's going to undergo a mental health evaluation, which our understanding can typically take 4 to 6 weeks. No further court action is going to proceed until that report is returned. A lot to talk about. I want to bring on forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober to discuss this. Doctor, thanks so much for coming back here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
What are the specific indicators that a forensic psychiatrist would look for to determine whether a defendant, a criminal defendant like Afeni Muhammad, whether or not she's competent to stand trial? Because competency is a very specific definition. It's not insanity.
Right. So competency is a moving target. Someone can be competent 1 week and they can be incompetent the next week. So in the United States, competency is determined by a U.S. Supreme Court case, U.S. v. Dusky. And essentially what that case says is that you have to have the ability to work with your attorney, to collaborate with them, and have a rational and factual understanding of the charges against you. So that is the competency standard in the US.
Hey, real quick, I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this episode of Sidebar. And if you don't know what it is, Odoo is a powerful all-in-one business software that helps you manage everything from sales to accounting and, yes, manufacturing. Schedule your production, manage your assembly line, fine-tune your work orders with Odoo, all in one easy-to-use platform. Do you need fully assembled manufacturing software that will put your business ahead of schedule? Odoo has you covered. Plus, Odoo's manufacturing app syncs seamlessly with your sales, inventory, and purchasing modules so everything stays connected and running smoothly. Check out Odoo to take your manufacturing process to the next level and get a free 15-day trial today at odoo.com/sidebar manufacturing. But generally speaking, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I have no idea what these charges mean. I have no idea what I did wrong. Is that typically what you see in an evaluation that raises a concern of competency?
As a general principle, yes, absolutely.
And what could be the reasons for a lack of competency?
So there are so many different reasons. I watched the Instagram video that she had posted prior to the incident, and you clearly have someone who has poor impulse control, is emotionally dysregulated, has escalating anger, repeated frustration, feels powerless over her situation, and feels that she's being subjected to this perceived injustice. There are so many different things here in the differential, and obviously I've never examined her, so I can't make a diagnosis, but I think about things like psychosis, a personality disorder, substance use, perhaps repeated exposure to trauma. And I believe there was a prior incident of a stabbing that she was associated with. I don't know that for certain, but so we have someone where there was a history of violence prior to the incident.
How common is it for defense attorneys to request these competency evaluations based on their own observations? It'd be one thing if there was a police report, right, or from another mental health professional, but based on their own observations, is that unusual to you?
No, it's not. The court can request it. The defense attorney can request it. It is interesting that she didn't want the evaluation. I almost feel like, she doesn't want to be perceived as mentally ill or crazy. But there were a lot of very concerning things that happened prior to this, and it seems like it was something that was building over time.
The fact that she reportedly objected to it, like you said, doesn't really factor into the process. I mean, does it suggest anything diagnostically?
Not necessarily, not one thing or the other. But again, the fact that her attorney requested it, to me, leads me to believe that her attorney was seeing something that was concerning that required a further assessment.
Can someone, let's be clear about this, someone can still be found to be competent to stand trial, but they can still raise a mental health defense, right? They can still maybe put forward an insanity defense if the jurisdiction allows that and it affects their culpability in some way, right? This doesn't preclude that.
Two separate things, yes. Someone can still raise an insanity defense. That's completely separate. Now, in this particular case, someone can be mentally ill and still be competent. So mental illness per se does not mean incompetent. It's a specific evaluation.
The fact that she wanted to be referred to this by this other name, we can get into the idea of multiple names, multiple identities. Did that suggest anything to you?
I think about delusions. I think about psychosis when I hear something like that. But again, there's just so much information that we would need. For example, was she treated for a prior mental health condition? Was she under the care of a psychiatrist? These are things I'd want to know. Talk to people that were around her in the hours and days prior to the incident. Those are all important things.
And moreover, as we talk about what this case might look like, and we don't really know if a mental health defense would be presented or not, but from a forensic psychiatrist point of view, how do they distinguish between anger or a personality disorder or a break from reality? Is it a mixture of a bunch of different factors? What should we be looking out for?
So those are not necessarily mutually exclusive. For example, someone can have a psychiatric disorder. They can also have a personality disorder. They can have both. But a personality disorder is usually a pervasive pattern of behavior that affects them in multiple domains of functioning. And they can also have an organic psychiatric condition like psychosis, where they're literally detached from reality and they're having paranoia, they're having hallucinations, they're having delusions. So you can have all of those things together, but they obviously require you to sort of parse things apart to figure out what is causing what.
Let me go back to Muhammad's Instagram and the declaration that she made there. So on her account, Official Risen Phoenix where she has more than 24,000 followers. Muhammad posted 2 videos just days before the stabbing, ranting about her manager, Jennifer Harris, sending her home early. And in one of the clips, wearing her McDonald's hat, Muhammad seethes with frustration.
I got sent home early yesterday. I got sent home early today by the same person. I'm telling you, she's a bully. This isn't funny. She needs to understand that just because she's a mother and got children doesn't mean that she can come in this store, disrespecting people, talking to them like everybody's beneath her. She has no respect. And it isn't funny at all. She brings a lot of negative energy in there. She always panic when there's a lot going on. And then she try to manipulate that and make it seem like we ain't doing something right. But we are working really hard and doing great. It's just the fact that she panicked. And I caught her a few times making a mistake and she tried to hurry up and play it off. Nobody's perfect. It's God knows it happens. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes, somebody might get confused. So it gets busy, yeah. But she needs to stop playing like she don't be making mistakes. I be catching her.
And then she delivers what now could arguably sound like an ominous warning.
But to get sent home 2 days in a row, man, and I came in on my off day to make up my time, and she still sends me home early, it's not funny. Somebody will have to do something about that. It's not funny. It's not fair. It isn't funny at all. So, she could keep being a bully if she wants to, but that is going to catch up to her. Because it ain't funny at all. It ain't.
2 days later, prosecutors say that's exactly what happened. Now, if you haven't been following the case, here's what police say went down. Jennifer Harris, longtime McDonald's employee, mother of 6, reportedly sent Muhammad home early on July 10th following a workplace dispute. Okay? Before leaving, Muhammad allegedly told Harris she'd be back. And she wasn't bluffing, or at least according to police, because according to them, Muhammad drove to a nearby park, retrieved a knife from her car, returned to the restaurant wearing a hooded mask to conceal her identity. She allegedly entered through the back, ambushed Harris, and stabbed her up to 15 times in front of coworkers. You have a legally armed customer in the drive-thru who heard the commotion, fired a warning shot into the air, caused Muhammad to allegedly drop the knife and flee. The witness apparently chases her down, holds her at gunpoint until police arrived. In fact, here's how East Point police described it on Facebook. The employee returned a short time later armed with a knife. The employee proceeded to stab the victim, whom she had the prior dispute with. A customer who witnessed the assault fired a shot to stop the attack. No one was struck by the bullet. The suspect attempted to flee the scene but was detained by the witness. East Point officers arrived a short time later and took the suspect into custody. The victim was rushed to a local hospital where she passed away from her wounds. So Muhammad now faces charges of first-degree murder, carrying a dangerous weapon with unlawful intent. Dr. Bober, from your perspective, what could be the tone and the content of those Instagram posts? What does that reveal potentially about her mental state leading up to the days of this attack? Assuming she did it, right? Because she is innocent until proven guilty.
Right. So it was really an angry rant where she was venting out all her frustrations about the way she was treated. And if you listen to the Instagram post, she says basically, and I'm paraphrasing, that someone is going to do something about this. So there really was a lead up to this if in fact she did it. And it does seem premeditated. We know that she went to the park. She returned to the McDonald's to stab her manager if again it occurred. And she was wearing a mask. So there does seem to be premeditation. There does seem to be acts at concealing the crime. So all these things would be important to know.
Allegedly concealing her identity, doesn't that defeat a potential insanity defense? Because the argument would be she knows what she's doing is illegal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It definitely works against that. It definitely shows that she targeted her manager, that she planned it, that she tried to conceal her identity. All this plays into it.
Again, taking all of this is true. If someone feels disrespected or someone feels they're bullied, what does that trigger exactly? Does it trigger an anger response? Does it trigger, again, if we're talking about mental health, a delusion, paranoia, those alleged slights? How does that factor into the analysis?
So listen, it really depends. We as human beings in society, we probably get treated poorly at times and we feel slighted. But, if we have ego strength and we have self-esteem and we are able to emotionally regulate ourselves, then we just move on. But for people who are suffering from mental illness, who have a low frustration tolerance, who have paranoia, who see the world through a distorted lens, who feel humiliated, those are people that may act out with rage or aggression.
And the 15 times, what does that tell you?
That tells me that it was very, very up close and personal, that she was filled with rage, that it just boiled over and it just exploded, and that she was completely unable to exercise restraint at that point.
You go to Mohammed's arraignment, July 11th. So her defense team argued for bond, revealing that she had this history of trauma and abuse.
She was in an extremely abusive relationship that was not only mental but physical, that involved alcohol issues, which is where the habitual second stems from, and her prior record.
But prosecutors, they quickly pushed back, and they dropped a major revelation that Mohammed had a previous stabbing conviction.
And then finally, the defendant does have a prior instance of at least one that I'm aware that involved a stabbing, similar obviously to the stabbing that occurred in this case, involving a knife. So given all of those factors, and given the fact that this court does have authority to give no bond to defendants charged with murder, I am asking at this time for no bond in this case.
Yeah, it turns out, according to the Macomb County Assistant Prosecutor, that in March of 2022, Mohammed had pled guilty in Virginia to unlawful wounding without malicious intent. She was sentenced to 4 years, but the sentence was suspended and she served only probation. Now, the judge in the current case ultimately did grant her bond, tune of $25 million, along with a long list of strict conditions should she be released. Those include wearing a steel-cut GPS tether, remaining in Michigan, reporting any address changes within 24 hours, submitting to daily check-ins with community corrections, undergoing alcohol and drug testing, having no contact with Jennifer Harris's family or any witnesses, and staying away from the crime scene, the McDonald's location where all this occurred. And according to inmate records, it appears she is still behind bars at the Macomb County Jail. Dr. Bober, let me turn to you on this. So how does a history or an apparent history of trauma and abuse, both mental and physical, if we're listening to what the defense had to say, how does that typically impact an individual's mental health or behavior?
So when we talk about previous trauma, we're talking about the part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the brain that is responsible for a fear and aggression response. And people who have trauma, sometimes this area of the brain can be overactive and it responds in a very primal way. So people who have a trauma history, who are exposed or triggered to certain situations, may act in a way that is irrational because of that prior trauma. The trauma affects them and sets them up for this in the future. So that is something to consider in her diagnosis and in looking at how she's charged with the crime.
And I got to say, I'm amazed by this Virginia conviction, right? We could talk legally about why she was out, how she was out, what the rules are there. But the point is, from a forensic psychiatric perspective, you know, how might Mohammed's prior stabbing conviction, which is just so eerily similar to what she's accused of now, how does that factor into the analysis? Because you're talking about an alleged repeat offender.
Well, it certainly increases her risk for future violence. Having a prior incident and now this incident, but it begs the question, was there some underlying condition that was untreated? Did she never receive the services that it seems like she needed to treat this condition? So there needs to be a firm diagnosis, there needs to be treatment, and all this plays into it along with the competency evaluation.
Dr. Bober, I want to explore some other psychological aspects of this case because we did a deep dive into Afeni Mohammed's Instagram and TikTok accounts, and we came across some very deeply disturbing and unsettling content. For example, in one TikTok video, Mohammed is seen holding 2 boxes of Play-Doh, doing absolutely nothing except staring at them in complete silence for a full minute. There's no explanation, there's no context, just blank staring, but it gets even stranger. So in this clip, she's seen brandishing a knife, then kissing it, and this was also posted before the killing, by the way. And then just one day before the killing, she posted this to Instagram. And the video shows a birthday cake with the word abracadabra written in icing, and then it cuts to Mohammed wearing a ski mask style hoodie. Strange, Dr. Bober, to say the least, but from your analysis, and by the way, would this factor into any analysis by a mental health professional during the course of this case, and how would it?
So not necessarily for competency, but maybe for an insanity defense. Because again, a competency evaluation is not static. She may be competent right now. She may not be competent 3 days from now. But for example, someone who has a history of psychosis or departure from reality or who is delusional, this may have impacted her during the crime itself. And that's why an evaluation for sanity would have to be done, or a criminal responsibility.
Now, the other way of looking at it is, a defense attorney could probably say, hey, listen, she's creative, she's an artist, right? This has no relation to the actual crime, but it's very hard to separate it. It's very hard to separate what she's accused of from these posts. You have to ask, warning sign, red flag? I mean, I don't know, assuming she did this.
It's one piece of information that has to be taken with everything else.
And again, what more, if you had the opportunity to speak with her, what would you like to know?
Oh, I would have so many questions. I would want to know, again, about prior mental health history. I'd want to know if she used substances. I would want to know about her trauma history. I'd want to know about similar incidents. These are all things I'd want to know. I'd want to talk to the people that she lives with, the people that she's friends with. Obviously, it would be helpful to have access to her social media and obviously any forms of electronic communication.
By the way, how can you make sure that she's telling the truth? How can you make sure that when during an evaluation, a mental health evaluation of some kind during the course of a legal case, that the subject is being transparent with you about their past, about their motivations? If she's asked about why did she make these videos, how can you determine whether or not that subject is being credible?
So you look for corroborating information, you look for collateral sources of information, and if all you have is the subject, then you would state in your report that all information was provided solely by her and there were no other sources of information. So obviously that is going to maybe cast doubt on the veracity of the information, but you would state it in the report. But you do everything you can to try to speak to collaterals, to try to look at other sources of information besides the subject.
Now, let me just go back to Jennifer Harris here, the victim in this case. So her death has left her 6 children without a mother. We can't forget that. A GoFundMe, the Jennifer Harris Legacy Fund, has been set up to support her children. And we're going to put it up there if you want to check it out, participate, donate of some kind. But that GoFundMe reads, through this fund, Jennifer's legacy of strength, compassion, and dedication will continue to guide and uplift her children. Resources from the trust will be used to support their educational journeys from early learning through higher education, as well as their overall well-being and personal development as they grow into adulthood. The Jennifer Harris Legacy Fund is a reflection of her lifelong commitment to family, opportunity, and the belief in a bright future. It ensures that her children are surrounded by the care, guidance, and support they need to thrive, and that her spirit will continue to shape their lives for years to come. So with Mohammed's mental evaluation pending, the next hearing is set for September 3rd. Dr. Daniel Bober, thank you so much for taking the time. It was good seeing you.
My pleasure, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.